A black mechanic stands in the center of a cracked asphalt lot on Detroit's east side, staring at three black SUVs parked in formation like a military convoy. Early morning light cuts across the scene, cold and sharp. His daughter watches from inside the garage behind him, 13 years old, frozen at the window, with her hand pressed against the glass. The mechanic's coveralls are stained with oil. His hands hang loose at his sides, but his shoulders are tight, the posture of a man who's learned to absorb blows without flinching. The SUV's doors open in sequence. Men in suits step out. Then a woman emerges from the center vehicle, white, 50s, calculated authority, radiating off her like heat. She introduces herself as Margaret Chen, board chair of Drummond Velocity. She's here with an offer. Before she can finish, another vehicle screeches into the lot. A second woman steps out, younger, sharper, dressed like she's about to fire someone. Victoria Drummond, CEO. Her attorneys flank her like attack dogs. Victoria's voice cuts through the morning air. "You're nobody, a mechanic, and you think you can embarrass me?" She accuses him of corporate espionage, of stealing proprietary technology, of crimes he didn't commit. Margaret tries to intervene. Victoria doesn't let her. The mechanic says nothing. His jaw tightens. His hands, those oil-stained, steady hands, begin to tremble. Inside the garage, his daughter is crying. And here's what Victoria Drummond doesn't know. The man she's threatening used to hold 17 patents. He used to stand on stages and explain how the future worked. He used to be someone she would have begged to hire, but he walked away, and he's been hiding ever since. If you believe the most dangerous thing you can do to a person is underestimate them, stay with this story, because what happens next will prove that silence is not the same as surrender. Before we begin, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments, have you ever had to hide who you really are to protect someone you love? But to understand how a man with a genius-level mind ended up in a Detroit garage being threatened by a woman who doesn't know his name, we need to go back 48 hours, to a Friday afternoon when the only thing Marcus Webb was trying to do was close up shop and take his daughter home. 48 hours earlier, Marcus Webb was just trying to get through another Friday. The transmission pan came off clean. No stripped bolts, no cross-threading, no drama. Marcus set it on the workbench and wiped his hands on a rag that had stopped absorbing oil about 3 years ago. The afternoon light came through the garage's single window at an angle, catching dust motes and the edges of tools hung on pegboard with the kind of precision that made the cramped space feel less like chaos and more like order held together by will. Behind him, Imani sighed loud enough to be heard over the hiss of the air compressor cooling down. "He's not even reading the group chat," she said, not looking up from her phone. "I sent him the CAD file yesterday. Twice. Nothing." Marcus glanced over his shoulder. His daughter sat at the desk he'd built from reclaimed wood he'd found behind a demolished church on Mack Avenue. She had her chemistry textbook open, her phone in one hand, and a pencil tucked behind her ear. Her hair was pulled back in a high puff today, the way she wore it when she was annoyed and didn't want anything in her face. "Maybe he's busy," Marcus said. "He's not busy, he's lazy." Imani set her phone down harder than necessary. "I'm doing all the work, and he's going to put his name on it like he contributed. Welcome to group projects." "That's not helpful, Dad." Marcus smiled. He bent back over the transmission, checking the gasket for wear. "You want helpful, or you want me to agree with you?" "Both." "Then document everything you do. Keep the emails. Save the chat logs. If he doesn't pull his weight, you'll have proof when it's time to talk to the teacher." Imani was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That's actually smart. I have my moments." She went back to her homework. Marcus went back to the gasket. The rhythm was easy, familiar. This was how most of their afternoons went. Her at the desk, him at the bench. The space between them filled with the comfortable static of two people who didn't need to perform for each other. The garage smelled like WD-40 and years of work. The space heater in the corner rattled but kept the chill off. Outside, someone's stereo played something with heavy bass that Marcus could feel in his chest more than hear. The neighborhood was worn. Anyone could see that. Boarded windows, cracked sidewalks, buildings that used to be something else before the money left and never came back. But it wasn't defeated. There were murals on the brick walls, barber shops that had been open for 40 years, corner stores where people knew your name. It was the kind of place that bent but didn't break. And Marcus had come to understand that about it the same way he understood the torque specs on a cylinder head, through repetition and respect. Imani flipped a page in her textbook, then stopped. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her backpack and smoothed it out on the desk. "Can you look at this?" Marcus set down the gasket and walked over, wiping his hands again out of habit, even though they weren't getting any cleaner. Imani had sketched a mechanical gripper arm, modular joints, adjustable tension, a servo motor housing that looked almost professional. "For robotics class," she said, "we're supposed to design something that could pick up objects of different weights without breaking them." Marcus studied the drawing. She'd done good work. The proportions were right. The logic was sound. But the servo placement was going to create a balance problem under load. "You're going to get torque drift here," he said, pointing to the second joint. "The weight's going to pull it off center when you're holding something heavy. So I need a counterbalance. Or you move the servo closer to the base. Distribute the load." Imani grabbed her pencil and started redrawing. Marcus watched her work, the way her tongue stuck out slightly when she concentrated, the way she erased and redrew the same line 3 times until it was exactly right. She got that from her mother. Shanice used to do the same thing. The framed photo sat on Marcus's toolbox where it always sat. Shanice, 7 months pregnant, laughing at something off camera. Her hand rested on her belly. Behind her, the Helios Industries building rose glass and steel against a blue sky. Marcus had taken that picture on a Sunday. They'd gone in to finish a project report and ended up staying for hours because Shanice wanted to test a prototype one more time before the Monday review. She always wanted one more test, one more check, one more confirmation that everything was right. Marcus looked away from the photo. "Why didn't you go to college?" Imani asked, still drawing. The question came easy, like she'd been holding it for a while, and finally decided it wasn't worth the wait. Marcus had heard it before. He had an answer ready. "Couldn't afford it." "But you're smart. You could have gotten scholarships." "Maybe." "Ms. Patel says people like you, people who understand systems, they're the ones who should be designing things, not just fixing them." Marcus picked up a wrench that didn't need picking up and set it back down in the exact same spot. "I'm good at fixing things." "I know, but you're good at other stuff too." Imani looked up from her sketch. "You just explained load distribution in like 10 seconds. Most people don't even know what that means. Most people don't need to." "Dad." "Imani." She held his gaze for 3 seconds, then went back to her drawing. She didn't push. She never did. That was the agreement they had, unspoken but absolute. She could ask, and he could deflect, and neither of them had to pretend it wasn't happening. The bell above the door chimed. Marcus turned. A man in his 60s stepped inside, keys in hand, moving slow the way people do when their knees don't work the way they used to. "Mr. Webb?" "Mr. Carver, she's ready." Marcus led him to the sedan parked in the bay. A 2008 Camry with 200,000 miles and a new alternator that had cost Marcus $60 in parts and 3 hours of labor. He'd charged Mr. Carver $120. The man counted out 620s from a worn wallet and shook Marcus's hand. "You're a lifesaver," Mr. Carver said. "Every other shop wanted 300. "They've got overhead, I don't." "Well, I appreciate it." He paused at the door. "You take care of that girl. She's going places." "Yes, sir." The Camry pulled out onto the street, exhaust barely visible in the cold air. Marcus watched it go, then checked his watch. 4:47, close enough to closing time. He started putting tools away, wiping down the workbench, shutting off the compressor. Imani packed up her books without being asked. This was the routine. This was the life. Small, contained, deliberately built to stay that way. Then Marcus heard it, an engine misfiring, the rough idle of something expensive running on bad gas or a failing fuel pump. He looked up. A black Mercedes SUV sputtered twice, coughed once, and died directly in front of the garage. Marcus stood very still. Imani looked up from her backpack. "You going to see what they need?" Marcus didn't answer. He was watching the driver's side door open, watching a man in a dark suit step out, watching him move to the rear passenger door like he was escorting someone important. "Dad?" "Yeah," Marcus said quietly. "I'll see what they need." But something in his chest had already gone tight, Some old instinct he thought he'd buried a decade ago, waking up and whispering that whatever was about to walk through that door, it wasn't going to be simple. The driver stepped out first, moving fast, his tie loose and his shirt collar damp with sweat. He looked at Marcus like a drowning man looks at a lifeboat. "We need help," he said. "The chair's dead. Control board failure. Complete shutdown." Marcus walked toward the SUV. The rear passenger door was already open. Inside sat a girl, maybe 8 years old, strapped into a motorized wheelchair that looked like it cost more than Marcus's entire year of rent. The chair was sleek, medical grade, custom built. The girl's hands rested on the joystick control, but her face was twisted with tears. Then the other rear door opened and a woman stepped out. She was white, early 40s, wearing a tailored suit so perfectly pressed it looked like she'd been sewn into it. Her heels clicked against the pavement. She looked at Marcus's garage the way someone looks at a public restroom they're being forced to use. Mouth tight, eyes narrowed, already calculating the damage. "Is there another shop nearby?" she asked, not to Marcus but to the driver. "Something cleaner?" The driver shook his head. "Ma'am, we're 10 minutes from the gala. This is the closest." "Fine." She pulled out her phone, didn't look at Marcus. "I'll call the specialist. He can meet us at the venue." Marcus glanced at the girl in the wheelchair. She wasn't crying about the chair. She was crying the way kids cry when they've been told something cruel and don't have the words to fight back yet. The woman was still on her phone, pacing now, her voice sharp and clipped. "Yes, I need someone immediately. Custom adaptive chair, control board failure. I don't care what you're doing. This is priority." The girl's shoulders shook. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, trying to stop the tears before her mother noticed. Marcus stepped closer to the SUV. He crouched down beside the wheelchair so he was at the girl's eye level. "Hey," he said quietly, "what's your name?" The girl looked at him, surprised. Her voice came out small. "Helena. Helena, I'm Marcus. Can I take a look at your chair?" She nodded. The woman, Helena's mother, turned around, phone still pressed to her ear. She looked at Marcus like she'd just noticed a stray dog wandering too close. "Are you capable of even diagnosing the issue?" she asked. Marcus didn't answer. He was already scanning the chair's control panel, looking for the access point. The woman sighed, checked her watch. "Probably not. We'll wait for the specialist." Behind Marcus, the driver cleared his throat. "Ma'am, the specialist said 90 minutes minimum. The gala starts in—" "I'm aware." The woman's voice went cold. She looked down at Helena, and her expression shifted into something Marcus recognized, the look of a parent who'd run out of patience 3 hours ago. "This is why I told you to check the battery this morning. Now we're going to be late, and it's going to be a whole scene, and everyone's going to stare." Helena's lip trembled. Fresh tears spilled over. Marcus stood. He looked at the woman directly. "I can take a look." She stared at him. Her eyes moved from his oil-stained coveralls to his worn boots to the garage behind him, with its cracked concrete and flickering fluorescent light. "No offense," she said, "but this is a $40,000 piece of medical equipment. I'm not letting some—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Marcus held her gaze. "Your choice." The woman's phone buzzed. She answered it, turned away, started pacing again. Marcus looked back at Helena. The girl was staring at him with the kind of hope that breaks when you're not careful with it. "Can I?" Marcus asked again, this time just to her. Helena nodded. Marcus moved to the side of the wheelchair and found the access panel. It was locked with a proprietary fastener, tamper-proof, designed so only certified technicians could open it. Marcus pulled a small screwdriver from his pocket, the kind with interchangeable bits, and selected one that fit. The panel popped open. The driver watched. "You've worked on these before?" Marcus didn't answer. He was looking at the circuit board inside, tracing the wiring with his eyes, reading the system the way most people read a menu. The woman finished her call. She walked back over, still holding the phone like a weapon. "The specialist will be here in 90 minutes, she announced. "We'll have to miss the opening remarks, but at least—" "I can fix it in 60, Marcus said. The woman stopped. She looked at him like he'd just told her he could fly. "Excuse me. 60 minutes, maybe less." She laughed. It wasn't a warm sound. "You're serious." Marcus was already wheeling Helena's chair toward the garage. The girl looked back at her mother, uncertain. The woman's face went tight. "Wait," she said. "You can't just—" "Ma'am, if he can fix it—" The driver trailed off under her glare. The woman checked her watch again, looked at the garage, looked at her daughter. Her jaw worked like she was chewing glass. "Fine," she said. "But if you damage it, I'm holding you personally liable." She followed Marcus inside. Imani looked up from her desk, eyes wide, watching this woman in a white suit step into the shop like she was touring a crime scene. Marcus positioned the wheelchair under the brightest work light. He opened the access panel fully, examined the board. His fingers moved across the components, checking connections, identifying points of failure. The control system used a redundant processor array with failover protocol. One of the arrays had shorted. The backup had tried to compensate but couldn't handle the load. The whole system locked out. "What company made this?" Marcus asked the driver. The driver pulled out his phone, checked something. "Adaptive Kinetics. Custom order." Marcus knew the company. He knew their design philosophy. He knew the engineer who'd probably built this specific board. His hands went still for just a second. Imani was watching him. She'd seen that look before. The one that said her father recognized something he wasn't supposed to recognize. The woman was on her phone again, typing something. Not even watching. Helena was watching, though. She'd stopped crying. She was leaning forward slightly, trying to see what Marcus was doing. "What's broken?" she asked. "Your processor," Marcus said. "The part that tells the chair what to do when you move the joystick. Can you fix it?" "I'm going to try." The woman snapped her phone shut. "The specialist just confirmed 90 minutes. So unless you have some kind of miracle solution—" Marcus looked at Imani. "Can I borrow your Raspberry Pi?" Imani blinked. "My what?" "The Pi from your robotics kit." She stared at him for 3 full seconds. Then she opened her backpack, pulled out a small circuit board wrapped in an anti-static bag, and handed it to him. Marcus took it. He turned back to the wheelchair. The woman was watching now. Really watching. Her phone hung loose in her hand. "What are you doing?" she asked. Marcus didn't answer. He was already pulling parts from his workbench. Servo motors, a soldering iron, a spool of wire. His hands moved steady, certain, like they remembered something his mind had tried to forget. Marcus worked in silence. His hands moved across the wheelchair's control board like he was reading Braille. He removed the damaged processor array, set it aside, and began mapping the chair's wiring system on a piece of scrap paper. The diagram took him less than 3 minutes. Every connection, every voltage point, every failover protocol. Imani watched from her desk, her homework forgotten. Victoria paced near the garage door, phone pressed to her ear. She was explaining to someone why she'd be late. Her voice was sharp, clipped, like she was already blaming them for something that hadn't happened yet. Helena sat in her wheelchair under the work light, watching Marcus's hands. She'd stopped crying. Her eyes followed every movement, the way he tested connections with a multimeter, the way he sorted components by size, the way his fingers moved steady and sure like they'd done this 1,000 times before. Marcus pulled the Raspberry Pi from its anti-static bag. He connected it to his laptop, opened a terminal window, and started typing. Code appeared on the screen faster than most people could read. He was writing a control interface from scratch, mapping the Pi's GPIO pins to match the wheelchair's motor system. The driver stood near the door, keys still in his hand. He wasn't checking his watch anymore. He was watching Marcus like he was watching something impossible happen in real time. Victoria finished her call. She walked over, heels clicking against the concrete. She looked at the wheelchair, at the scattered components, at Marcus hunched over his laptop with grease still on his hands. "How much longer?" she asked. Marcus didn't look up. 40 minutes. She checked her watch, made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been something else. Then she walked back to the door and made another call. Helena leaned forward slightly. "What are you doing now?" "Writing instructions," Marcus said. "So the new brain knows how to talk to your motors." "The Pi is the brain? For now? Will it work the same?" Marcus paused. His fingers stopped moving across the keyboard. He looked at Helena, really looked at her. Not at the wheelchair, not at the broken parts, but at the girl who'd been crying 20 minutes ago because her mother had called her an inconvenience. "It'll work better," he said quietly. He turned back to the laptop, kept typing. Imani had moved from her desk to the workbench. She was close enough now to see the code on the screen. She recognized some of it. Python, GPIO libraries, PWM control. But the way her father was using it, the speed at which he was building something functional out of nothing, was something she'd never seen before. Marcus finished the code. He saved it, transferred it to the Pi, and began the physical rebuild. He mounted the Pi inside the wheelchair's control housing using zip ties and double-sided tape. He soldered connections, checked voltages, rerouted power from the chair's battery to the makeshift processor. His hands didn't shake, didn't hesitate. Every motion was exact. He pulled 2 servo motors from his parts bin and modified them, adjusting their range of motion with a Dremel tool and replacing their stock gears with ones that matched the chair's torque requirements. The sound of the drill cut through the silence. Victoria looked over, frowned, went back to her phone. Helena watched everything. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why are you helping me?" Marcus stopped. He set down the servo motor. He looked at the girl in the wheelchair, at the dried tears on her cheeks, at the way her hands gripped the armrests like she was holding on to something she was afraid to lose. "Because you need help," he said. It was the simplest answer in the world, the truest one. Helena nodded. She didn't say anything else. Marcus went back to work. He installed the modified servos, wired them into the control system, and ran a series of diagnostic tests on his laptop. The screen filled with data, motor response curves, voltage stability, feedback loops. He adjusted values, refined the code, tested again, and again. 53 minutes after he'd started, Marcus powered on the wheelchair. The control panel lit up, green indicators across the board. No errors, no faults. Helena stared at the lights like she didn't believe them. "Try it," Marcus said. She touched the joystick, barely moved it. The chair responded instantly, smooth, controlled, no lag. She moved it forward, backward, turned left. The response was so clean, so precise that her mouth opened slightly in surprise. She pushed the joystick further. The chair accelerated smoothly, no jerking, no hesitation. She spun in a tight circle, stopped, started again. Her face transformed. The weight she'd been carrying for the last hour lifted, and what replaced it was something Marcus hadn't seen since she'd arrived. Joy. She laughed, a real laugh, light and unguarded. She did another circle, faster this time, grinning. The driver was staring. His mouth hung open slightly. He looked at Marcus, then at the wheelchair, then back at Marcus like he was trying to solve an equation that didn't make sense. Victoria had stopped talking. She stood perfectly still, phone lowered, watching her daughter move across the garage floor with more control and confidence than the $40,000 chair had ever given her. Marcus closed his laptop. He wiped his hands on a rag that wouldn't get them any cleaner. Helena stopped the chair in front of him. "It feels different. Better." "The response time is faster," Marcus said, "and the acceleration curve is smoother. You'll get less wrist fatigue." "How did you do that?" "I paid attention to how you were holding the joystick." Helena looked at him for a long moment. Then she said very quietly, "Thank you." Marcus nodded. He started gathering his tools, putting them back in their places on the pegboard. The work was done. The girl was safe. That was all that mattered. Victoria finally moved. She crossed the garage in 4 sharp strides and stood beside Helena's chair. She looked at the control panel, at the jury-rigged processor housing, at the makeshift components holding together a system that shouldn't work but did. "We need to go," she said to the driver. The driver blinked. Should we pay?" "We're late." Marcus looked up. "No charge." Victoria's eyes snapped to him. For a second, something crossed her face. Confusion, maybe, or suspicion. Like she couldn't process why someone would do this without wanting something in return. "If you have any trouble," Marcus said to Helena, "come back." Helena smiled, a real smile. "Okay." The driver helped guide the wheelchair back to the SUV. They had a ramp this time, something they'd improvised from the back storage. Helena rolled up into the vehicle. She turned back one more time, waved through the open door. Marcus raised his hand. waved back. Victoria got in without a word. The driver closed the door, climbed into the front seat. The engine started. The SUV pulled away from the garage, smooth and quiet, disappearing into the Friday afternoon traffic. The garage was silent. Marcus stood in the middle of the floor, tools in hand, grease on his coveralls. The space felt bigger with them gone. Emptier. Imani was staring at him. He could feel her gaze like a weight. He put the tools back on the bench, moved slowly, deliberately, giving himself time to figure out what to say. "Dad." He didn't turn around. "How did you know how to do that?" Marcus didn't answer. Saturday morning came too early. Marcus hadn't slept. He'd spent most of the night staring at the ceiling of the apartment above the laundromat, listening to the hum of industrial dryers through the floor and replaying the way Helena's chair had moved. Smooth, responsive, alive. The way Imani had looked at him afterward, like she'd seen someone she didn't recognize. He'd deflected her question, changed the subject, sent her home with takeout and a reminder about her chemistry homework. But the question was still there, hanging in the air between them like smoke. "How did you know how to do that?" Marcus pulled on his coveralls and walked to the garage before dawn. Imani met him there at 7, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her hair pulled back in a puff. She didn't ask again. She just started organizing inventory like they'd planned, counting bolts, sorting washers, labeling bins. The street outside was quiet. Early morning light slanted through the single window, catching dust in the faint exhaust haze that never quite left this part of the city. Then Imani stopped counting. "Dad." Her voice was tight. "Wrong." Marcus looked up. She was staring out the window, her hand frozen over a bin of spark plugs. 3 black SUVs were pulling up to the curb in perfect formation. Marcus's chest went tight. He set down the wrench he was holding and walked to the door. Imani stayed where she was, rooted. The SUVs parked, engines cut off in sequence. Men in dark suits stepped out, 3 of them, standing at even intervals like they'd rehearsed it. They didn't move toward the garage. They just waited. Then the rear door of the center vehicle opened. A woman stepped out. Asian, 50s, gray suit that looked expensive without trying. She moved with the kind of authority that didn't need to announce itself. She saw Marcus standing in the doorway and walked toward him, her stride calm and deliberate. "Mr. Webb?" she said. "That's me. My name is Margaret Chen. I'm the board chair at Drummond Velocity." She extended her hand. "I'd like to talk to you about what you did yesterday." Marcus didn't take her hand right away. He was still processing the SUVs, the security detail, the way this woman had just appeared outside his garage like she'd materialized out of the same nightmare he'd been trying not to think about all night. "Helena's driver contacted me," Margaret said, lowering her hand but not her gaze. "He told me what you did for her, how you fixed the chair when our own engineers said it couldn't be done." Marcus's jaw tightened. It wasn't complicated. "That's not what I heard," she smiled. "It was small, measured, and completely genuine. I'd like to make you an offer, Mr. Webb. Drummond Velocity is launching a new adaptive technology division. We're looking for someone to lead it. You'd have full lab access, a team, a significant salary, and the resources to build whatever you think people need." The words hit Marcus like a fist to the sternum. He opened his mouth, closed it, couldn't find air. "I know this is sudden," Margaret said, "but I've done my research. I know you used to work in this field, and what you did yesterday wasn't luck. It was mastery." Behind Marcus, Imani was standing in the doorway now. She'd heard everything. Marcus's hands started to shake. He shoved them into his pockets. "I don't," he started. A car engine roared. Tires screeched. Another vehicle pulled up behind the SUVs, a sleek black sedan, moving too fast, stopping too hard. The door flew open before the car had fully stopped. Victoria Drummond stepped out. She was wearing a different suit than yesterday. Darker, sharper. Her heels hit the pavement like gunshots. 2 men in expensive ties flanked her, attorneys by the look of them, carrying briefcases like weapons. She saw Margaret. Her face went white, then red. "What the hell is this?" Victoria snapped. Margaret turned, calm. "Victoria, the first was just, you were just poaching my find." Victoria's voice was loud enough to carry down the block. "You heard about the chair, and you came here to steal him before I could make an offer." "That's not..." Don't lie to me, Margaret. You've been trying to undercut me for 2 years. This is just another play. Margaret's expression didn't change. This isn't about you. Everything is about me when you're involved. Victoria turned to Marcus. Her eyes were sharp, cold, furious. Did she tell you we're considering legal action? That what you did yesterday was unauthorized modification of proprietary medical equipment? Marcus blinked. What? You tampered with a $40,000 wheelchair without certification, without authorization, and without any legal right to access that technology. Victoria's voice was rising now, performing for an audience that wasn't there. You could have hurt my daughter. You exposed my company to massive liability, and now Margaret here is trying to reward you for it. I fixed her chair, Marcus said quietly. You hacked it. I helped her. You stole intellectual property. Victoria stepped closer. The only way you could have done what you did is if you had access to our systems, our schematics, our proprietary designs, which means you either worked for one of our competitors or you're engaged in corporate espionage. Margaret raised a hand. Victoria, that's absurd. Is it? Victoria wheeled on her. Then explain to me how a mechanic in a garage in Detroit just happened to have the exact skills needed to reverse engineer a custom adaptive interface in 90 minutes. Explain how he knew the manufacturer, the specs, the failover protocols. She turned back to Marcus. You're either a spy or you're a liar. Either way, I will bury you. The street was silent. Somewhere down the block, a car alarm went off and cut out. Marcus stood very still. His hands, still in his pockets, were trembling so hard he thought everyone could see. Margaret tried one more time. Victoria, if you the 500th, just listen. I'm done listening. I'm done being humiliated by people who think they can undercut me. Victoria gestured to one of her attorneys. The man stepped forward, pulled an envelope from his briefcase, and held it out to Marcus. This is a cease and desist. You will surrender all documentation related to the repair. You will not speak about it, not to the press, not to anyone. And if you try to profit from what you did, I will sue you for everything you have and everything you'll ever have. Marcus didn't take the envelope. The attorney set it on the hood of the nearest SUV. Margaret's face had gone hard. This is a mistake. The mistake was letting him touch my daughter's chair in the first place. Victoria looked at Marcus one last time. You're nobody. You'll always be nobody. And if you think for 1 second that you can embarrass me and walk away from it, you don't know who you're dealing with. She turned, walked back to her car, got in. The attorneys followed. The sedan pulled away fast and loud, leaving tire marks on the asphalt. Margaret stood in the street watching the car disappear. Then she turned to Marcus. I'm sorry, I didn't think she'd... She stopped, took a breath. The offer still stands. If you're interested, call me. She handed Marcus a business card. Then she got back into the center SUV. The security detail followed. The 3 vehicles pulled away in formation, quiet and controlled, leaving Marcus alone on the sidewalk. Imani stepped out of the garage. Dad? Marcus picked up the envelope from the hood. His name was typed on the front in clean, professional letters. He opened it. The letter inside was 2 pages, dense legal language. But the message was clear. Cease all activity related to the repair. Surrender all documentation. Never speak about it again, or face criminal charges for unauthorized medical device modification, theft of trade secrets, and corporate espionage. Marcus read it twice. His hands stopped shaking. Something else took over. Something colder, heavier, harder to name. Imani was watching him. What does it say? Marcus folded the letter, put it back in the envelope, looked at his daughter standing in the doorway of the garage he'd built with his own hands, in the neighborhood where no one knew his name, in the life he'd constructed to keep her safe. Go inside, he said quietly. But, please. She went. Marcus stood alone in the street, holding the letter that threatened to destroy him for helping a child, and realized that the past he'd buried 10 years ago had just dug itself back up. 2 weeks passed like watching something rot. Marcus's phone stopped ringing. Customers who'd been coming to the garage for years stopped showing up. The few who did come asked careful questions. Had he heard about the complaints? Was it true the city was investigating safety violations? They paid in cash, took their cars, and didn't come back. The apartment above the laundromat smelled like industrial detergent and fabric softener 24 hours a day. It was small, 2 rooms and a bathroom, clean in the way places are clean when no one really lives in them. Marcus kept his tools in plastic bins stacked against one wall. Imani kept her books on a shelf made from cinder blocks and scrap wood. They ate dinner on the couch most nights, paper plates balanced on their knees, the TV on, but neither of them watching. Marcus didn't talk about the letter. He kept it in his toolbox at the garage, folded inside the envelope, tucked beneath a photo of Shanice. He read it twice a day, morning and night, like he was memorizing it, like he thought if he read it enough times the words would change. Imani watched him disappear, not all at once, not dramatically, just slowly like someone turning down a dimmer switch 1 degree at a time until you couldn't remember what the room had looked like when it was bright. He stopped eating regular meals, stopped asking about her homework, stopped fixing things around the apartment that needed fixing. The kitchen faucet dripped. The bathroom light flickered. Marcus, who could rebuild a transmission blindfolded, just stared at them like they belonged to someone else's life. One night, Imani needed a screwdriver. She'd been working on a project for a robotics class, a small motor assembly that kept jamming, and her own toolkit was at school. She knew Marcus kept spare tools in the storage boxes under his bed. She pulled one out, opened it, found zip ties, wire strippers, electrical tape. No screwdriver. She opened another box. Inside, beneath a layer of old shop rags, was a laminated ID badge. Imani picked it up. The photo showed her father, younger, wearing a collared shirt instead of coveralls. His hair was darker, no gray at the temples. He was smiling, actually smiling, the kind of smile she'd only seen in old pictures with her mother. The text on the badge said, Dr. Marcus Webb, lead engineer, Helios Industries. Imani stared at it for a long time. Then she pulled out her phone and Googled her father's name. The results filled the screen. Patents, 17 of them, all assigned to Marcus Webb, adaptive neurointerface systems, biomechanical joint articulation, responsive prosthetic control algorithms, articles from tech journals, a profile in Wired from 2013 calling him one of the most promising engineers in the assistive technology field, a TED Talk from 2015. She clicked it, watched her father stand on a stage in front of hundreds of people, explaining how neural interfaces could give paralyzed patients control of artificial limbs through thought alone. He spoke clearly, confidently, like someone who'd spent his whole life knowing exactly who he was. Imani watched the whole thing, 18 minutes. Then she watched it again. Her father wasn't a mechanic who used to work with computers. He was a doctor, an engineer, a pioneer, and he'd been hiding it from her for her entire life. Imani closed the laptop, put the badge back in the box, slid the box under the bed. She sat on the floor of the apartment, surrounded by the smell of laundry detergent, and tried to breathe. The next morning at school, she couldn't focus. Chemistry was a blur. English was worse. By the time she got to robotics class, her hands were shaking. Miss Patel noticed. She always noticed. Imani, she said after class, when the other students had packed up and left. You okay? Imani looked at her teacher. Miss Patel was young, maybe 30, with kind eyes and the kind of patience that came from actually caring whether kids learned or just showed up. She'd been the one to push Imani into advanced robotics in the first place, the one who told her she belonged there even when she was the only girl in the room. Can I ask you something? Imani said. Always. Hypothetically, Miss Patel smiled. Hypothetically, if someone did something really amazing with assistive technology, like something that shouldn't be possible, who would care? Miss Patel's expression shifted. The smile stayed, but something else moved behind it. Curiosity, maybe, or concern. What kind of amazing? Like redesigning a wheelchair control system from scratch, in an hour, using spare parts. Miss Sources, Patel set down the circuit board she'd been organizing. That's not hypothetical, is it? Imani didn't answer. Who did this? I can't. Okay. Miss Patel held up a hand. You don't have to tell me, but if someone actually did that, there are people who'd want to know. Disability rights advocates, researchers, people who care about making technology accessible. Like who? Miss Patel thought for a moment. Dr. Elliot Sarayan. He's at MIT now, but he does a lot of work with community-based assistive tech. He's been trying to make these systems affordable for years. If someone figured out how to do what you're describing, she trailed off, pulled out her phone, typed something. Then she wrote an email address on a piece of paper and handed it to Imani. If this is real, Ms. Patel said quietly, someone needs to know. Imani took the paper, folded it, put it in her pocket. Thank you. Ms. Patel watched her for a long moment. Imani, whatever this is, be careful. Imani nodded. She left the classroom, walked to the library, sat down at a computer in the back corner where no one could see the screen. She opened her email, typed the address Ms. Patel had given her. The cursor blinked in the subject line. Imani thought about her father, sitting in the apartment above the laundromat, staring at a letter that threatened to destroy him for helping a child. She thought about the badge under his bed, the TED Talk, the patents, the man on that stage who spoke like he knew exactly who he was. She typed, "You need to know what my father did." Then she wrote the email. Every detail, the wheelchair, the repair, the girl who couldn't walk, the CEO who threatened them, the cease and desist letter, her father's name. She didn't mention Helios, didn't mention the badge, just the facts of what had happened 2 weeks ago in a garage in Detroit. Imani read it twice. Her finger hovered over the send button. She thought about what Ms. Patel had said. Be careful. She thought about her father, disappearing a little more every day. She clicked send. 5 days after Imani sent the email, a rental car pulled up outside the garage. Marcus was under a Honda Civic, replacing brake pads, when he heard the engine cut off. He slid out from under the chassis, wiped his hands on a rag, and walked to the bay door. A man stepped out of the car. Late 40s, Middle Eastern, wearing jeans and a jacket that looked like it had been packed in a suitcase. He had kind eyes and gray streaks in his dark hair. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, just looking at the garage, like he was trying to decide whether to go through with something. Then he saw Marcus. His face changed. Recognition, then something deeper. "Marcus," he said quietly. Marcus knew the voice before he knew the name. It hit him like a punch to the chest. "Elliot." Dr. Elliot Sarayan walked toward the garage slowly, carefully, like he was approaching something fragile. He stopped a few feet away. "It's been a long time," Elliot said. 10 years. "I've been looking for you." Marcus's jaw tightened. He glanced back into the garage. Imani was at her desk watching. Her backpack was on the floor beside her. She'd been there when the car pulled up. She hadn't moved. "How did you find me?" Marcus asked. Elliot pulled out his phone, showed Marcus the screen. An email. The subject line. "You need to know what my father did." Marcus read the first line, looked at Imani. She was still watching, her face unreadable. "She reached out 3 days ago," Elliot said. "Told me everything. What you did for Helena Drummond. The cease and desist. The threats." He paused. "I got on a plane as soon as I could." Marcus turned back to Elliot. "You shouldn't have come. Marcus, you need to leave." Elliot didn't move. "I spent a decade trying to find you. After Shanice died, you just vanished. No forwarding address, no contact. I called every number I had. Nothing. I left." "I know, but you didn't have to disappear." Marcus looked at the man who'd stood beside him at Shanice's funeral, who'd co-authored 3 papers with him, who'd been in the lab the night Imani was born. The man who knew exactly who Marcus used to be. "What do you want, Elliot?" "To help you." "I don't need help." "Yes, you do." Elliot's voice was gentle but firm. "Helena's case is public now. Margaret Chen's people leaked it to the press. The disability advocacy community is talking about it. They're calling it a miracle, and they want to know who did it." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "They can't know." "Why not?" "Because I signed an NDA. Because if I say anything about Helios, they'll destroy me. The NDA is void, Marcus." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." Elliot stepped closer. "They covered up a death. Shanice died because of a design flaw they knew about and ignored. They paid you to stay quiet about it. That's not a legal contract. That's extortion." Marcus's hands curled into fists. "Don't talk about her." "Someone has to." Elliot's voice softened. "You've been carrying this alone for 10 years. You don't have to anymore." The garage was silent except for the hum of the space heater in the corner. Marcus could feel Imani watching. He could feel the weight of the conversation pressing down on him like something physical. "If I go public," Marcus said quietly, "Victoria Drummond will come after me harder. She's already filed complaints. She's already trying to shut me down. If she finds out who I really am, she'll use it against me. Against Imani." "Or," Elliot said, "the world will see that a man with 17 patents, a man who pioneered adaptive neural interfaces, fixed a child's wheelchair in a garage because it was the right thing to do, and Victoria Drummond will look like exactly what she is, a CEO more worried about her reputation than her own daughter." Marcus shook his head. "You don't understand." "Then help me understand." "I walked away to protect her." Marcus gestured toward Imani without looking at her. "Everything I did, leaving Helios, moving here, keeping quiet, it was all to keep her safe. If I go public now, all of that was for nothing." Elliot was quiet for a moment. Then he said very gently, "What if keeping quiet is the thing that's hurting her?" Marcus looked up. "What?" "You're teaching her that brilliance is something to be ashamed of, that using your gifts makes you a target, that hiding is safer than standing up." Elliot paused. "Is that what you want her to learn?" Marcus's throat went tight. He turned toward Imani. She was still at her desk, but now she was holding something. The laminated badge. Dr. Marcus Webb, lead engineer, Helios Industries. She'd kept it. After finding it, after Googling him, after learning the truth, she'd kept it. Their eyes met across the garage. "I watched your TED Talk," Imani said. Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't. "You were explaining how people could use their minds to control prosthetic limbs. You said it was about giving people their lives back." Marcus couldn't speak. "Why did you stop?" she asked. "You know why." "Because Mom died," Imani's voice cracked. "But she wouldn't want you to stop helping people. Would she?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Marcus looked at his daughter, 13 years old, holding a badge from a life he'd buried, asking him a question he'd been avoiding for a decade. She looked so much like Shanice. Same eyes, same way of cutting through everything complicated and getting straight to the truth. "No," Marcus said quietly. "She wouldn't." Imani stood up, walked across the garage, stopped in front of him. The badge was in her hands, but her eyes were full of tears. "Then why are you letting someone like Victoria Drummond win?" Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. A wall he'd built 10 years ago, brick by brick, to keep the past out and his daughter safe. She was standing in front of him, asking why he'd built it in the first place, and he didn't have an answer that made sense anymore. The vow he'd made to protect her, the silence, the hiding, the small, deliberate life, had become the thing suffocating them both. He looked at Elliot. "If I do this, there's no going back." "No," Elliot said. "There isn't." Marcus looked at Imani. "You understand what this means? People are going to ask questions. About me, about your mother, about why we left. I know. It's going to get messy." "I know, Dad." Imani's voice was small but certain. "But you can't keep hiding. Not anymore." Marcus took a long breath, let it out slow. Then he nodded. Elliot stepped forward. "Then let's show them who you really are." The community center smelled like coffee and old carpet. Folding chairs filled the conference room in uneven rows. Cameras lined the back wall. Journalists sat with notebooks and recording devices. Disability advocates clustered near the front, some in wheelchairs, some standing, all watching the empty podium with the kind of attention that comes from waiting for something they've been promised but don't quite believe yet. Marcus stood in the side hallway, looking through the doorway at the crowd. His hands were shaking. He'd changed into a clean button-down shirt, dark jeans, shoes without oil stains. He looked like someone between worlds. Not the mechanic anymore, not yet the engineer he used to be. Imani stood beside him, wearing a hoodie and her best sneakers. Her hair was pulled back in a puff. She looked nervous but steady. Elliot came down the hallway, adjusting his tie. "We're ready when you are." Marcus nodded, didn't move. "You don't have to do this," Elliot said quietly. "You can still walk away." Marcus looked at Imani. She met his eyes. Didn't say anything. Just held his gaze the way she'd held the badge in the garage. Steady, certain, waiting for him to be who she already knew he was. "Yeah, I do," Marcus said. He walked into the room. The noise level dropped. People looked up. Cameras swiveled. Marcus crossed to the podium, his footsteps the only sound in the space. Elliot followed, standing off to the side. Imani found a seat in the second row where she could see everything. Marcus stood at the podium, looked out at the faces, saw Helena's driver in the back, wearing a baseball cap trying to blend in. Saw reporters he didn't recognize. Saw advocates he'd never met but who'd spent years fighting for the kind of work he used to do. He adjusted the microphone, cleared his throat. "My name is Dr. Marcus Webb," he said. His voice was quiet but clear. "I'm a biomechanical engineer, or I was. I worked at Helios Industries from 2010 to 2015. I hold 17 patents in adaptive neurointerface systems. And 3 weeks ago, I fixed a wheelchair in a garage on Detroit's east side." The room was silent. Marcus reached down and lifted the modified interface onto the table beside the podium. The Raspberry Pi, the servo motors, the wiring harness, all of it laid out like evidence. "This is what I built," he said. "A custom control system for a motorized wheelchair. The original board had failed. I redesigned it using spare parts and open source code. It took 90 minutes. He walked through the process. Explained the failure point. A processor array overload with no backup protocol. Showed how he'd rerouted the signal through the Pi, how he'd written the interface code to match the motor response curves, how he'd tested the feedback loops to ensure smooth control. He spoke the way he used to speak on stages, in labs, in rooms full of people who understood the language. Technical but accessible, precise but human." A reporter raised a hand. "Dr. Webb, how did you know how to do this?" "Because I've been doing it for 20 years. "But you're a mechanic now." "I'm an engineer who fixes cars." Another question. "Why did you leave Helios?" Marcus's jaw tightened. He looked down at the podium, took a breath. "My wife died," he said. "Her name was Shanice Webb. She was a test coordinator at Helios. In 2015, she was running a demonstration of a new prosthetic joint system. There was a pressurized failure, a component we knew had issues but hadn't fixed yet. She died in front of me." The room went still. "Helios buried it," Marcus continued. "Paid me out, made me sign a non-disclosure agreement. They told me if I ever spoke about what happened, they'd sue me for everything. So I took my daughter and I left. I moved to Detroit. I stopped building things." His hands gripped the edges of the podium. 3 weeks ago, a little girl's wheelchair broke down outside my shop. Her mother didn't think I could help, but the girl needed help. So I did what I've always done. I fixed it." He paused. "And then I was threatened. The girl's mother accused me of corporate espionage. She sent me a cease and desist letter. She told me I'd be destroyed if I ever spoke about what I'd done. And for 2 weeks I didn't, because I was afraid. Because I thought staying quiet would keep my daughter safe." Marcus looked at Imani. She was watching him with tears in her eyes. "But my daughter taught me something," Marcus said. "She taught me that hiding doesn't keep anyone safe. It just teaches the people you love that the world is something to be afraid of." He turned back to the room. "I'm here today because a child needed help and I helped her. That's all. I didn't steal anything. I didn't hack anything. I used the skills I've spent my life building to do what engineers are supposed to do. Solve problems that matter." A woman in a wheelchair near the front spoke up. "What do you want people to know, Dr. Webb?" Marcus thought about that. Thought about Shanice, about the 10 years he'd spent hiding, about Imani finding the badge and refusing to let him disappear. "I want people to know that accessibility isn't a luxury," he said. "It's a right. And the people who need it most can't afford to wait for corporations to figure out how to make it profitable." The room stayed quiet for a long moment. Then the questions came. Fast, overlapping, urgent. "Why now? Why did you hide? What are you going to do next?" Marcus answered them one at a time. Honest, direct, no deflection. He talked about the NDA, about the fear, about the choice between protecting his daughter and teaching her to be ashamed of who he was. "I was wrong," he said, looking at Imani again. "I should have trusted her to be strong enough to handle the truth." Imani was crying now, not hiding it, just letting the tears fall. The press conference ended. Elliot stepped up, thanked everyone for coming, said Dr. Webb wouldn't be taking further questions today. The cameras kept rolling. Journalists surrounded the podium, trying to get one more quote, one more angle. Disability advocates came forward, introducing themselves, thanking Marcus, asking if he'd consider consulting on their projects. Marcus shook hands, answered questions. Let himself be who he used to be, just for a moment before the world decided what came next. Imani pushed through the crowd and hugged him. He held her tight, his hand on the back of her head, feeling her shake with relief or fear or something he couldn't name. You did it, she whispered. We did it, Marcus said. 3 hours later, Marcus was back in the apartment above the laundromat when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but he did. Dr. Webb, a woman's voice, calm, measured, familiar. This is Marcus. It's Margaret Chen. I just watched your press conference. We need to talk. 3 days after the press conference, Marcus and Imani walked through the glass doors of Drummond Velocity headquarters. The lobby was all polished marble and chrome, the kind of place where even the air felt expensive. A receptionist in a crisp suit checked their names against a list, handed them visitor badges, and directed them to the elevators. Marcus wore the same button-down shirt from the press conference. Clean, pressed, but not new. Imani wore her usual hoodie and sneakers. They looked exactly like what they were, people who didn't belong in buildings like this. The elevator rose in silence. 23 floors. When the doors opened, Margaret Chen was waiting. Dr. Webb, she said, extending her hand. Thank you for coming. Marcus shook it. Ms. Chen, please call me Margaret. She looked at Imani. And you must be Imani. I've heard a lot about you. Imani nodded, didn't smile. She'd been quiet all morning, watchful in the way she got when she wasn't sure what was about to happen. Margaret led them down a hallway lined with framed patents and product photos. Conference rooms on both sides, all glass, all empty except for one at the end. She opened the door and gestured them inside. The room was smaller than Marcus expected. A long table, 8 chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. 3 people were already seated, 2 men in dark suits, 1 woman in gray. Board members, Marcus assumed. They stood when he entered, shook his hand, introduced themselves with titles he didn't retain. They all sat. Margaret at the head of the table. Marcus and Imani on one side, the board members on the other. Margaret folded her hands on the table. Dr. Webb, I'll be direct. We'd like to offer you a position as lead engineer of a new adaptive technology division at Drummond Velocity. Full creative control, your own team, significant equity stake, and a salary that reflects the value you'd bring to this company. She slid a folder across the table. Marcus opened it. The first page was a contract. The second page was a number with more zeros than he'd seen in 10 years. This is a chance to do the work you were meant to do, Margaret continued, to build systems that change lives, to honor your wife's memory by making sure her death wasn't for nothing. Marcus stared at the number. Imani leaned over, read it, then looked at her father. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the ventilation system. Marcus closed the folder. What happens to the patents? Margaret didn't hesitate. Drummond would own them. That's standard for any work developed under company employment. And the devices we'd build, who would they be for? We'd target the premium assistive tech market initially. High-end custom solutions for clients who can afford. So not accessible, Marcus said quietly. Margaret paused. We'd explore affordability initiatives down the line. But Drummond is a for-profit company. We have shareholders, investors. We can't just give technology away. Marcus looked at the board members. They sat perfectly still, faces neutral, waiting to see how this played out. What about open source designs? Marcus asked. The board member on the left, older, gray hair, expensive watch, leaned forward slightly. That would undermine our competitive advantage, Dr. Webb. We're offering you the resources to build at scale. That comes with certain expectations. Expectations that the people who need this technology most won't be able to afford it. The board member's expression didn't change. We're a for-profit company, Dr. Webb. We're offering you a chance to do meaningful work within that structure. If you're looking for charity, there are other avenues. The words hung in the air, not cruel, just factual. This was how the world worked. This was the deal. Marcus looked at Imani. She was watching him, her face unreadable. He thought about Shanice, about the lab where they'd spent years building things that mattered, about the moment when the prototype failed and everything ended, about the decade he'd spent hiding from the work he loved because he was afraid of what it could take from him. He thought about Helena, rolling across his garage floor, laughing. He looked at Margaret. I appreciate the offer, I really do, but I can't accept it. Margaret's expression shifted. Surprise, maybe disappointment. Dr. Webb, I spent 10 years walking away from who I was, Marcus said. I'm not going to spend the next 10 building things that only rich people can use. The board member who'd spoken before straightened slightly. With all due respect, Dr. Webb, you don't have the infrastructure to build at scale. You don't have funding. You don't have distribution. What exactly do you think you're going to accomplish on your own? Marcus met his eyes. I don't know yet, but I know what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to build a system that decides who deserves help based on who can pay for it. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, What do you need? Marcus blinked. What? You clearly have a vision. What would it take to make it happen? I need partners who believe access matters more than profit. I need people who understand that the best technology in the world is worthless if the people who need it can't afford it. Margaret looked at the board members. They looked back at her. Some silent conversation happened in the space between them. Then Margaret turned back to Marcus. I can make introductions, she said. Nonprofit coalitions, disability advocacy groups, foundations that fund accessible innovation. No strings attached. This isn't about Drummond anymore. This is about making sure you build what you were meant to build. Marcus stared at her. Why would you do that? Because I watched your press conference, Margaret said, and I realize you're right. We've been building for the wrong people. She stood, extended her hand again. I'll send you a list of contacts by the end of the week. People who care about the same things you do. What you do with it is up to you. Marcus stood, shook her hand. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is going to be harder than taking my offer. I know. Margaret smiled, small, genuine. Good luck, Doctor. Webb. Marcus and Imani walked back through the lobby, through the glass doors, out into the afternoon sunlight. The city stretched out around them, loud, crowded, indifferent. Marcus felt lighter than he had in years. Imani looked up at him. You just turned down a lot of money. Yeah. Mom would have been proud. Marcus's throat went tight. He put his hand on Imani's shoulder. They walked toward the parking garage in silence. As they reached the car, Margaret appeared at the building entrance behind them. She called out across the plaza. Dr. Webb, one more thing. Marcus turned. Victoria Drummond resigned this morning. The board forced her out. Marcus absorbed that, nodded once. What about Helena? Her father has full custody now. He's a good man. She'll be okay. Margaret went back inside. Marcus unlocked the car. He and Imani got in. He started the engine but didn't pull out of the parking spot. He just sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, staring at nothing. Dad? Imani said. We're going to build something, Marcus said quietly. Something real. Something that actually helps people. I know. It's going to be hard. I know that too. Marcus looked at his daughter, 13 years old, watching him with absolute certainty. She'd found his badge, contacted Elliot, pushed him to stop hiding. She'd been brave when he couldn't be. You ready? He asked. Imani nodded. Let's go build something. Marcus pulled out of the garage and drove toward home, toward whatever came next, toward the future his daughter had given back to him. 6 months later, the sun rose over Detroit's North End and caught the glass front of a building that hadn't existed in the winter. The Shanice Webb Center for Accessible Innovation stood at the corner of a street that was waking up. Coffee shops opening, people heading to work, morning light warming the brick and concrete. The building was modern but not flashy, with wide accessible ramps and automatic doors. Inside, through the glass, you could see equipment, prototypes, workbenches, the kind of space where things got built. Marcus stood in the lobby, watching people arrive. He wore a clean shirt, dark jeans, no coveralls. His hands were still stained in the creases. Some things didn't wash out, but the rest of him looked different, settled, present. Imani was beside him, her hair pulled back in twists, wearing a hoodie that said Detroit Robotics across the front. She'd been at the center every weekend for the last 3 months, learning to solder, to code, to turn the sketches in her notebook into things that actually worked. Dr. Sarayan arrived first, carrying a box of pastries from a bakery downtown. He set them on the reception desk and shook Marcus's hand. "Ready?" he asked. "As much as I'll ever be." Margaret Chen came next, dressed simply, no entourage. She looked around the lobby, at the open floor plan, the accessible design. The wall where they'd hung photos of people the center was built to serve. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. "It's functional," Marcus replied. "That's what matters." Margaret smiled. "Shanice would have loved it." Marcus nodded, didn't trust himself to speak. The doors opened again. A man in his late 30s stepped inside, holding the door for the person behind him. Helena Drummond rolled through in her wheelchair. She was 9 now, taller, her hair longer. She was still using the chair Marcus had modified in his garage 6 months ago. It moved smooth and fast as she navigated into the lobby, her face bright with recognition. "Dr. Webb," she said. Marcus crouched down to her level. "Hey, Helena, you made it. Dad said we could come see what you built." Helena's father extended his hand. "James Drummond, we haven't officially met." Marcus stood, shook it. "Marcus Webb, thank you for coming. Thank you for what you did for her." James's voice was steady but full. "I mean that." Helena was already looking past them into the lab beyond the lobby, where machinery hummed and prototypes sat on tables. "Can I see?" "Absolutely." Marcus gestured toward the door. "Come on." He led them through. The lab was filled with natural light from the floor-to-ceiling windows. Workbenches lined the walls. Engineers, 3 of them, all former colleagues of Marcus's who'd found him after the press conference, were setting up stations. In the center of the room, a prototype mobility device sat on a test platform. Adaptive suspension, modular design, built to be affordable. Helena rolled up to it, eyes wide. "What is it?" "A new kind of walker," Marcus said, "for people who need support but want to stay mobile. We're testing the weight distribution today." "Can I help?" Marcus looked at her father. James nodded. "Yeah," Marcus said. "You can help." He introduced Helena to the team, showed her the control interface, explained how the suspension worked, let her ask every question that came to her mind. She was sharp, curious, unafraid, exactly the kind of person this place was built for. Imani joined them, carrying a tablet with test protocols. She and Helena started talking about code, about sensors, about how to make the device respond to different terrains. 2 kids who understood what it meant to build something that mattered. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Community members arrived, people in wheelchairs, people using canes, parents with children who needed adaptive equipment they couldn't afford anywhere else. Former colleagues came to see what Marcus had built. Press showed up with cameras, asking questions Marcus answered patiently, clearly, without ego. By noon, the center was full. Voices, laughter, the sound of work being done. Marcus stood in his office, a small room off the main lab with a desk, a chair, and a window that looked out over the neighborhood. The framed photo of Shanice sat on the desk. Same photo that had been on his toolbox in the garage, relocated here where it belonged. He touched the frame, ran his thumb along the edge. "I did it," he said quietly. "I built something that won't hurt anyone." Imani appeared in the doorway. "Dad, Helena wants to know if she can come back next week." Marcus turned. "What did you tell her?" "I said yes. Was that okay?" "Yeah, that's perfect." Imani stepped into the office, looked at the photo on the desk. "Do you think Mom would have liked this?" Marcus looked at his daughter, 13 years old, standing in a lab that bore her mother's name, asking a question she already knew the answer to. "Yeah," Marcus said. "I think she would have loved it." Imani nodded, smiled. "What are we building next?" Marcus looked out the window, saw the street below, the city beyond, the people moving through their lives, saw the center, full, alive, purposeful, doing exactly what it was meant to do. "Whatever people need," he said. They walked back into the lab together. Helena was testing the mobility device now, moving it across the platform while the engineers took notes. Dr. Sarian was explaining something to a group of advocates. Margaret was talking quietly with James Drummond, both of them watching Helena work. The hum of machinery filled the space. The sound of tools, the sound of people building things that would help other people. The sound of work that mattered. Marcus stood in the center of it all, a man with graying temples and steady hands, who'd spent 10 years hiding and 6 months rebuilding, who'd walked away from everything and found his way back to what he was meant to do. Outside, the sun moved higher. Families began arriving for the afternoon open house. The doors stayed open. People kept coming. The building's name was engraved above the entrance in clean, simple letters. The Shanice Webb Center for Accessible Innovation. A place built on loss and love, on hiding and revelation, on the belief that the best way to honor the dead is to serve the living. Marcus Webb had buried his gifts for a decade, and his daughter had taught him that the most dangerous thing you can do with a gift is let fear decide whether the world gets to see it. He'd stopped hiding. He'd built something real. And now every day people would walk through these doors and find what they needed, not because they could afford it, but because someone believed they deserved it. True genius is measured not by the empires it builds, but by the quiet mercy it offers when no one is watching, and the courage to let the world see it when it matters most.